Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second of the second series of faith formation seminars. And we're delighted and privileged to have with us this evening Sister Andrea Fraile, who is one of the sisters of the Gospel of Life in Glasgow. And I'll introduce her a little more in a minute. But as you will have picked up, the title of her talk is "I have come that they may have life," which Jesus says in the Gospel of John, chapter 10. And then the subtitle, you always have to have a subtitle these days, "Sex and Babies." You may recall that when we began this second series, you did ask to address contemporary controversies. And, well, I don't know how controversial Sister Andrea will be. I think, I will leave that to her, what her approach is. But I suppose the Catholic Church in our time is famous for being opposed to contraception and abortion, and both of those things cause controversy and are countered by many people. The Church's teaching against contraceptive intercourse, which is how one should express it, I think, goes back, in fact, a long time. But there was in the 1950s and 1960s the development of what's popularly known as the pill. And this, as it were, brought up the question a second time, a new time. And many thought that perhaps that did not go against the traditional teaching of the Church. And the matter was much debated and discussed in the 1960s in Catholic circles. And in 1968, Pope Paul VI wrote an encyclical called Humanae Vitae, in which he upheld the traditional teaching of the Church against contraceptive intercourse, whatever may be the kind of contraception used. And this caused a great furore, and in many ways still does. I remember I was not a Catholic at the time that came out, and I was simply a teenager. And I remember, because I think the whole encyclical, rather surprisingly, was printed in the Times. I remember thinking, well, what can an 80-year-old man, celibate man, know about these things, so on, and how can he possibly be right? But I did, at the back of my mind, have a sneaking admiration that he had the courage to go against such a consensus, such an unthinking, in a way, consensus that these things were all right. Why, very briefly, without going into the whole argument and countering all possible objections, but why what is it that the Church sees as wrong or inadequate, as it were, in contraceptive intercourse? The answer is it's almost like a lie. It goes against the inner meaning of what the sexual act is. It's, as it were, overlaying the original language and meaning of the sexual act, which is a full gift of one person to another, or two people to each other, including the possibility of fertility. And if you introduce forcibly, as it were, a division, a distinction between what's called the unitive aspect of the sexual act, which is bringing two people together, and the its procreative aspect, which, of course, statistically doesn't occur every time, nothing like, but is still an inner potential of it. If you introduce a division there, you are interfering with, contradicting the intrinsic meaning of what this action is. Now, people may find that people may find that hard to accept, but there it is. Now that's one issue, and I won't go into that. I'm just, as it were, mentioning that briefly. And then the other aspect, talk about sex and babies, is of course abortion, which became permissible in the United Kingdom in 1967 and as a result of which many millions, I suppose, of unborn children have lost their lives. Now, in a sense, the Catholic problem with contraception ultimately goes back to the fifth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. You shall not commit adultery, because it's about the sexual relationship between man and woman, husband and wife. But the Church's difficulty with abortion is that it is against the sixth commandment. Sorry, I'm getting the numbers wrong. The fifth commandment. The fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill, because it is the taking of an innocent life. And I think that is, once you realise that, so there are all sorts of dimensions, human dimensions, which Sister will mention to it. There is that fundamental fact that there is a human life at stake here from the very beginning of conception, and contemporary science shows unanswerably that there is a total continuity from the first moment of conception right through to birth and beyond. It is the same being, living being that is there. It doesn't suddenly become a human being at some point. It's a human being right from the very beginning, and therefore it has the rights that any human being has. So, those two aspects. Now, let me just introduce a little bit Sister Andrea, though really she's her own best advertisement, as it were. But in 1997, the Archbishop of Glasgow, that time, Cardinal Winning, he made a public pronouncement that if there was any woman considering having an abortion, she could get in touch with the Church, and the Church would do whatever could be done to help that woman have her child and bring up her child. Now that was quite a thing to come out with, really, and he hadn't thought about the practical aspect of it at all. He just said this, and then later in the day, is that right? Later in the day rang up one of his, a young woman who helped him in various ways, Roseanne Reddy, and said, would you take this on, please? Which was quite a shock for her. But being a woman of parts, one might say, being a fine and noble character, she did, and she began immediately, and the thing snowballed, and then and many women did contact the Church, and Roseanne, with helpers, began to work for them and do all she could for them. And then in 2000, Andrea Fraile joined Roseanne, and the Cardinal established them as the Sisters of the Gospel of Life. So they work together. They have, you can say more about it, or what you actually practically do, but they have many volunteers who work with them. They have, this isn't not a number sort of matter of boasting or statistics or competition or anything, but the lives of many unborn children have been saved through them. At least 150 children have been born who would not have been born. Many mothers who have been in great anguish and distress and not sure what to do have been helped through and brought to a better place interiorly and exteriorly. So it's a wonderful work that is carrying on. And anyway, Sister Andrea will talk about these things of which she and Roseanne have a huge experience. You might think, what would a sister, like a monk, know about sex and babies? But as we'll find out, she knows an awful lot. But so over to you, Sister. Thank you.